Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, SAP HANA Migration to the Google Cloud Platform in 12 weeks, Lessons Learned from a Recent Project Go Live. We really appreciate all of you taking time out of your very busy schedules to attend today's educational webinar, and we hope to answer all of your technical questions for your SAP HANA Migration to the Google Cloud Platform. We will be starting the webinar shortly, but first I wanted to go through a few housekeeping notes. Only our presenters' phones are live. Your microphones have been muted by default to block any background noise. Our presenter will be answering questions at the conclusion of the webinar. If you have a question at that time, please type it in your questions window and we will answer it at that time. If we don't get to your question during the presentation, I or another member of the Managecore team will be sure to follow up with you directly. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and a link will be made available to all attendees after the webinar. So now I would like to introduce today's presenter, Nick Miletich. Nick is the Director of Technologies for Managecore, providing customized cloud and hosting and SAP operational support to our customers. He has over 15 years of experience in the SAP technologies and infrastructure services, and Nick stays in cutting-edge technology and leads Managecore's emerging technology efforts, including an industry-leading SAP HANA Cloud on GCP that he will be talking about today. So now, without further intro, take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Kristen. So as Kristen mentioned, today we will be discussing how we migrated and how Managecore approaches migrating SAP HANA into the Google Cloud Platform. So for today's webinar agenda, I'll give you a brief overview of who Managecore is and what we do, and then we'll focus on why Google Platform or Google Cloud Platform for SAP. And then we'll go into a few requirements and considerations that you should be made aware of as you're contemplating moving SAP workloads into GCP. And then some recent success story on moving an SAP environment into the GCP platform. So first and foremost, a quick overview on Managecore. So we are a certified SAP partner and a leading provider of SAP technical managed services. What we do is focus on everything technical surrounding SAP. So that includes migration projects, steady state managed services, and cloud hosting services as well. Our support team is unique in the industry in that we have on staff only experienced tenured consultants. With SAP, it is a very robust product that requires a significant amount of support, and we feel that consultants that work for Managecore need to have the experience and expertise to be able to support an environment such as SAP. Each consultant that we have has an average tenure of 15 plus years, and all of our consultants together bring expertise on managing over 200 customers and over 500 successful SAP projects. We are, in addition to an SAP partner, a Google certified partner, and our consultants are cross-trained in both SAP certifications and Google Cloud Platform certifications. So first, I want to talk about why the Google Cloud Platform for SAP. So the Google Cloud Platform, or GCP, really provides a holistic approach to hosting your SAP environment. You can deploy new workloads in this environment and spin them up very, very quickly and have a HANA system up and running within an hour. There are scripts available to do that, and you can also migrate your environments from an on-premise solution or another cloud solution into GCP. GCP offers migration tools such as Anthos Migrate to be able to move your environment seamlessly, and these tools are generally free of charge. They're part of the Google Cloud Platform. And once you're in GCP, Google has a lot of different products and services that can transform your business and help you along with that digital transformation. Be it BigQuery, for example, with SAP, they have co-developed SDA access, so you're allowed to do like smart data access within that environment, and you're allowed to have a certified solution and co-innovation with SAP and GCP. In addition to that, it sets you up for a platform that lets you do a lot of other technologies such as IoT and machine learning. In addition to the transformation, a lot of clients wonder, what does GCP have to offer in the sense of pure infrastructure as we're contemplating moving SAP to GCP. The biggest feature within GCP is that they do have the largest privately managed network in the world. So GCP does not ride any other carrier circuits when connecting all of its data centers. It is completely isolated from any internet or anything of that nature. They drop their own circuits and drop their own lines and connect every single data center via their own private backbone. In addition to that, they provide a lot of security and data protection by default. Unique to GCP is the fact that they provide, in addition to data encryption in transit, which most every cloud provider offers, they provide it at rest by default, which is unique to the GCP platform. So as GCP provides the facility infrastructure, such as the hardware, the cooling, the data center space, what Managecore does is provide a holistic solution when it comes to support of your SAP environment. So partnering with GCP for the facilities and infrastructure piece, Managecore overlays that with public cloud and SAP application support. So Managecore at its core will help with resource provisioning, network configuration, spinning up servers, designing and architecting an environment within GCP, and then not only supporting that going forward, but helping with the SAP technical support, such as system patching, tuning, database support, installations, migrations, things of that nature when your system resides within GCP. So now I'm going to switch into the actual migration of your system into GCP. I'm going to start with a high-level overview of how Managecore approaches this type of migration. Managecore has a proven methodology on how we migrate your environments. And this will guarantee that you will have a comprehensive project plan and vetted process and procedure that will get you into GCP successfully. And it all really starts with planning. And I'll get into the details as we go through this presentation. However, with planning, it starts with figuring out your SAP environment, especially if you have one today. Anything around SAP's ratings, figuring out the sizing of your environment, possibly planning out as you migrate, is it a good time to do DMO, maybe change platforms, maybe upgrade your environment. And then from an infrastructure perspective, figuring out the nuances around your environment. So that could be anything from shares of file systems to load balancers to, vanity URLs where you're pointing your environment to a specific host name. Any of that is vetted out in the planning stage. Once we get that environment and that plan approach, what we do is we start with a sandbox environment, and if you don't have one, what we generally do is we will migrate possibly your production environment in an isolated network within GCP, and we will spin that up and get the initial testing going. So we'll make sure that that sandbox environment has been migrated successfully, can start, and then all the post-processing associated with it. So it could be, re-IPing, host names, things of that nature may change. And that's what we do in this blueprint phase. Once we have that process vetted, we go through your landscape, generally a dev, quality, and then your production landscape. As we go through that, we go in waves. So if you have more than one SAP product, we combine them in the dev environment and then go into quality and then into production with a complete product set. So for example, if you're running ECC, BW, and PI, we'll probably migrate all your dev environments together and go through the landscape. And then it ends with support. We do hypercare support for the first 2 to 4 weeks, and after that, we transition into steady state support and maintaining your environment within GCP. Now, when migrating your environment in GCP, there are considerations that you have to take and recommendations from both GCP and SAP. The first place to look when determining whether or not you want to migrate to GCP and the steps associated with it are the SAP notes and the GCP design architecture white papers. The GCP SAP notes are key, and they will tell you what is and is not supported by SAP in Google Cloud. And then in those notes, it'll tell you different topics such as VMs, what you can and can't do, what is supported from an SAP application standpoint. And then from the GCP design, moving to a public cloud is a little different. And as you move to that cloud, you have to architect it in a manner which it's highly redundant, highly available, and meets the needs of your business. And these GCP design documents listed will help you and aid you in that process. So now deep diving into some of these support details, one note to take into account is, and it's probably the most critical SAP note, is the SAP applications on Google Cloud Platform, supported products, and Google VM types. This is a note that you should start with when investigating how to move to GCP. So this note really lists all the current supported combinations and what VM types are supported. A few key takeaways from this note. ABAP and Java is supported, but NetWeaver 7.0 and higher are the only supported product versions, meaning if you're trying to migrate a 4.6c environment or ECC5, for example, those products generally are not supported within GCP. This note does also give you the equivalent SAP's ratings for the servers you're looking to migrate within GCP. So GCP has benchmarked them, been provided the SAP's ratings by SAP, and what we would do in that instance is look at your existing hardware, determine how many SAPs you're running today, and do a conversion to make sure that when you migrate into GCP, you're running with the same workload or better than what you had initially. We don't want to migrate you onto a system that is lower performing. In addition to that, be cognizant of database and OS platforms. Generally, only SUSE, Red Hat, and Windows are supported, and only certain versions. Databases are DB2, SQL Server, ASE, MaxDB, and HANA. So Oracle is not a supported platform in public clouds. And then in addition to that, this note, what you want to do from an SAP perspective as you're going to HANA is make sure that you read the certified hardware list from SAP's website. That will give you the exact hardware required and certified to run HANA. Not all VM types in GCP are supported for HANA. So deep diving a little bit into that note and that website from SAP, what you see here on the left are VM types supported for a NetWeaver stack within GCP. And you can see there's a multitude of them that are supported. One thing that is new to the public cloud that GCP does that other vendors do not is that you can have custom instance types. This means that you can spin up servers that have custom CPU and memory requirements, and SAP does support that. However, please review that note that I referenced earlier to make sure that you're following the ratio, because there are certain ratios that need to be taken into account in order to be fully supported by SAP. Now, if you move to the table on the left and you notice that there are similar server specs in that environment, and those servers are the ones that are supported for HANA. One thing to note in there is that you'll see some redundancy there, such as the N1 HiMem32 system, for example. They're both 208 gig systems. They're both listed there, but one is for OLAP OLTP, So for example, if you run BW on HANA or S4, you could use that, but it also is supported for SAP or SAP Business One. So both products are supported on that environment, but you can tell, if you look one up and you look at the M2 UltraMem 416, it is a 12 terabyte system, but it only works on OLTP. So you're going to mainly be running that on an S4 environment. So within GCP, every vendor has their own acronyms, and there are going to be a few in GCP that you're going to have to get yourself familiar with. And that terminology, is different between each vendor. And in GCP, some of the main ones that you'll be using are listed here. And I'll go through a few of them here. So GCP has a product called GCE, which is Google Compute Engine, and this is basically the server that you're going to be deploying. That is the CPU and memory that is associated with that environment. Then you move on to persistent disk. Now, persistent disk is basically your SAN storage, your traditional SAN that you would have on premise. GCP has a lot of different offerings with persistent disk. They have SSD, they have HDD. They also have features and functions such as regional persistent disk that will span multiple zones, and I will get into that zone and region concept here shortly. But each disk has different performance metrics and different capabilities, so definitely something worth looking into as you're choosing the appropriate disk type. Then we get into cloud storage, and that really is the inexpensive data storage. And that is your traditional storage that you would put backups on, for example. It's not meant to read out of necessarily, in heavy volumes. It's meant to store data there, and in the event that you require it, let's say a backup, for example, you would take your backup from cloud storage, move it back to persistent disk, and then restore it. So cloud storage is basically your storage disk. And in the next slide, I'll get a little more into regions and zones, but regions are basically Google's geographical locations, and zones are a location within that region, so kind of a data center, if you will. And VPC, that is your virtual data center. So VPC it's called a virtual private cloud, and that is what you will spin up, and that's the first and foremost resource that you will spin up as you configure a GCP environment. All your subnets, your instances, your disk, all of that gets deployed within a VPC. So a little bit about GCP regions and zones. So this concept is pretty straightforward. Almost all public clouds have the same similar concept, but I do want to explain it in a little bit of detail here. So regions are geographical locations. So if you see on the map here, you have Oregon, for example, or Virginia. Those are regions. Those are geographical locations. And then a zone is a physical data center within that region. The amount of zones that are in each region vary by the region. You can see here that, for example, Oregon has 3 zones, which means 3 physical locations within that region. And that's how you would determine, depending on your requirements, if you need more or less regions or zones, excuse me, you would pick the appropriate one. In addition to that, picking the right region is going to be critical, and it's really the first step in figuring out, how you want to run your workload within GCP. A few things to take into consideration are obviously proximity to user base, right? So the users themselves will kind of dictate where you put your environment. So for example, if you have a lot of users kind of on the West Coast and Northern West Coast, you probably want to pick Oregon as your region, US West 1, in order to deploy your environment, because that'll be the closest proximity to your users. You also want to pick a DR region kind of on the same premise, but also based on your requirements for how geographically dispersed you have to be for your organization. Now, the other thing to take into consideration too is when choosing a primary and DR location, you want to make sure that all the products that are required to run SAP are deployable in that, in each of those regions. So there are only certain products in each region. Now, most of these products from GCP are deployed in all these regions. However, you do want to make sure and validate that the products you want to use are available in each region. So I do want to talk a little bit and touch base on the networking, because I know that is on everyone's mind. How do I connect to GCP? And there are three main ways to connect to GCP. Most popular, and usually as we start SAP projects, the first type of connection is a cloud VPN. And this VPN is your traditional VPN, IPsec tunnel, and it can be spun up fairly quickly. As long as you have internet bandwidth, you can spin up a cloud VPN. It is the starting point for a lot of migrations into SAP, because that is the quickest way to get connected. So as we start with a VPN tunnel, each tunnel can have bandwidth of up to 1.5 gigabits per second. And that tunnel, and again, another unique feature to GCP is the fact that you can aggregate multiple tunnels together to increase your bandwidth. So if 1.5 gig isn't fast enough, or you need to transfer a lot of data, it is possible to combine VPN tunnels and transfer data at much faster speeds. The next most popular connection is a partner interconnect. And this basically is an extension of your organization's network. What you would do is generally talk to your carrier. So if you had a MPLS as an example today in your environment, most carriers can extend that network into GCP for you. They can also extend out, your main office or other branches into GCP as well. Now, these partner interconnects, they vary. Mileage may vary based on each different carrier. So it is in your best interest to call your carrier, make sure they can provide these type of connections, and determine what type of connections they can provide. But this is the second most common connection type, and generally what we see is a VPN, again, initially, followed by a partner interconnect as the project proceeds, because it will take 60 to 90 days generally to drop one of those connections with your carrier. And then what you would do at that point is we would have a cloud VPN as a backup. We'd leave that environment there and have that as a backup connection should that interconnect go down. And the third option is a dedicated interconnect. This is generally the least implemented option, just because it requires you to actually have a drop at the location that GCP has this particular drop. So it's generally not as convenient as a partner interconnect, because the partners have that final mile for you, whereas these the dedicated interconnect has to be at a Google location. So now I'm going to switch gears into architecture for SAP. There are best practices by SAP and GCP, and they're co-made by the two organizations to make sure SAP runs efficiently and effectively in GCP. Now, this diagram shows a typical deployment stack in GCP. The database here is HANA, however, it can be any database, and this is your standard traditional deployment, where you have your database and your PAS on one server here, and that is in a private subnet. You have a public subnet then deployed as well, and that has items such as your SAP router or jump servers, and those are within a zone, and then your zone is within a region. And your organization connects either through an interconnect or a VPN as depicted here, and it's similar to any traditional hosted solution, or similar to if you had on-prem hardware that you hosted at a different data center. The disk layout here is an example for HANA. Again, you can see that it's on persistent disk, and that persistent disk then has another mount point for backups, and that backup gets taken in cloud storage. This is your traditional deployment. I will get into HA and DR design architecture in the following slides and more highly redundant environments, but this is the starting point for deploying SAP within GCP. Now, as we go through and determine your requirements, you may have the requirement for high availability and disaster recovery. So here's an example of a combination of both. And here what we're doing is we are depicting a scenario where we have high availability for HANA, and then we have DR for HANA as well. This is not the application server. This is just strictly the database itself. So what we have here is HANA being replicated using standard HANA replication between two different zones within a region. So if you use the example of US West 1 in Oregon, what we have are two zones in there, so two physical data centers. One is running one HANA environment or database in that green box, and the other data center is running the other HANA environment in that green box. We're doing replication, but we are also doing some type of clustering. Here, generally what we do is have SUSE clustering enabled here, and we deploy it and have SUSE manage the two environments. So if one goes down, it fails over to the other. Then for DR, we have a completely different region, so possibly US East 1 or US Central 1, and we have that in geographically dispersed location, and we do HANA replication to that environment in that zone. And that way, you're protected if from a hardware failure or something of that nature, if the environment goes down, and then you're protected in the case of a catastrophic failure, such as an entire region goes down. So if there's power issues in that area in Oregon, you can fail over to US Central 1 in Iowa, for example, and your system has already been replicating and running there, and you can just proceed as business as usual. So this is our design and architecture that SAP and GCP recommends, and it's also what Managecore deploys for our clients. Now, if you want more highly redundant environments specific to your application itself, what we would do is design similar architecture, but with replication of the ASCS and application servers. So again, using some form of clustering such as SUSE clustering, we would also deploy the application on multiple different servers and use SUSE clustering to help control that, similar to an on-prem solution. And then for DR, we necessarily wouldn't replicate using any type of HA technology. What we would do is take snapshots of that environment, and those snapshots are pushed to cloud storage, and cloud storage is a global resource, meaning that I can then restore that from US West 1 to US East 1, for example, just by going to the console in GCP and restoring a snapshot. And that could take anywhere between 5-10 minutes to restore that snapshot, and you're up and running in that environment from an SAP perspective. So if you were to combo both of those together, you could have a very highly redundant environment with DR capabilities within GCP. Now, in addition to HA and DR requirements, everyone wonders, how do we do backups, and how do we make sure that my instance is getting backed up within GCP? And GCP provides a mechanism for this, and for both database and instances or servers themselves. And I'm going to focus on the instances or servers now, and then I will get into the databases. So what GCP does is provide you snapshotting functionality similar to any on-prem snapshotting tool. And basically what it will do is it will take an initial snapshot and then do incrementals at whatever interval you would like, and you have the ability to restore at a point in time. And these snapshots go from persistent disk to cloud storage and are stored in a highly redundant environment. GCP actually has snapshot scheduling as well. So what you can do is schedule not only snapshots, the duration of how often they're taken, but you can also schedule the length and duration of how long they're stored. So for example, you can schedule snapshots to be taken every hour and kept for 30 days. And that is all configurable within GCP. They offer that capability. And unique to GCP, again, are these snapshots. They're restorable within a multitude of regions because GCP does have a lot of global resources, which is very unique to the GCP platform. Something else that is very unique to the GCP platform are backups specific to HANA. So GCP is the only vendor, the cloud vendor, to certify backint with their platform, meaning I can use backint to do backups of a HANA database within GCP. And if you saw and followed the diagram earlier where I allocated persistent disk to take database backups, then move that database backup file from persistent disk to cloud storage, GCP provides you the functionality to get rid of that persistent disk for backup. So instead of doing 2 hops for backups, what you can do is take, using backint for HANA, take backups directly to cloud storage, bypassing that persistent disk, and therefore taking your backups and making them highly redundant right out of the gate, and therefore saving you money on and time and effort and complexity in doing backups for a HANA database. And I want to reiterate, this is very unique to the GCP platform and allows you to save money and complexity. So now I've talked a little bit about how we would migrate and the kind of common concerns around migrating to GCP or migrating SAP to GCP. Now I'm going to talk about a 12-week migration that Managecore had performed when migrating a HANA environment to GCP. So when talking about migrations, there's really 2 standard ways you can do these migrations. One is through a set of standard SAP migration tools. So that's your DMO, your SUM, SWPM. Those type of products can still be used to migrate SAP into GCP. Now, those migration techniques means that you can do it in a few different ways. One is you're running that copy, you dump it to flat file, and then you copy that export to GCP. And once it's in GCP, you resume DMO, for example, or SWPM, and create your environment in that fashion. There are also options, depending on your platform, to move a system into GCP even as a temporary system, and then do the DMO holistically within the GCP environment, cutting the time it would take to do the copy as an example. There's also another option, and that is to use a suite of cloud migration tools. Now, depending on the tool set used, they all operate in different forms and fashions, and they all have different prereqs, but there are cloud migration tools out there that will help you expedite the migration to GCP. One tool that GCP owns and is free of use for migrations is Anthos Migrate, and that allows you to migrate VMs over and physical servers over to GCP using a replication technology. Now, this specific technology tool kind of migrates environments in a non-traditional fashion. However, it is very seamless to the client and is a very unique approach to migrating systems. Basically, you install an OVA into your VMware environment. As an example, if you're running VMware, you hit the initial migration, and it'll migrate within a few minutes. It'll migrate and have a running system in GCP. You can also script out which servers it builds, host names, IP addresses. You can click a button and do it in waves. So all your dev systems can be migrated in one click of a button. They get over into GCP, get re-IP'd. You go in, start SAP, and it is up and running. Now you're probably thinking, I have a 2 terabyte system. How is that being migrated in 15 minutes into GCP? Well, with Bellustrata, or with formerly known as Bellustrata, but Anthos Migrate, what you do is it migrates all the pertinent data, and it migrates all the data that you are heavily using first within those 15 minutes, gets you a running system, then makes calls back to that other environment until it's fully synced. So the sync could take hours or a few days, but depending on your bandwidth, but you have a running system in GCP within minutes. Now there are other replication tools as well. There's tools that do the opposite, right? They will replicate your environment, and once it's fully replicated, at some point you decide you're going to make the switch over, and what you do is you stop the application, you sync up with the remainder of the replication, then you do a failover, and your whole system is failed over within a few minutes in the new GCP environment. And from there, you start up SAP, do all the post-processing, and you have a running system. So there are different cloud migration tools out there to be utilized, and they're generally faster than migrating in the traditional SAP methodology. So this chart I wanted to present to you today because as you are thinking and contemplating, a migration to GCP, you have to take into consideration how large your data set is and what types of migrations are realistic. So as you're migrating, bandwidth really becomes a key factor. You want to make sure you have enough bandwidth to do the replication. And that could be, again, dependent on your time frame. If there's certain migrations that have to happen over a weekend, if you're doing traditional SAP migrations and you have, a 5 terabyte database, you're gonna have to run the export, upload it to GCP, and then do the import. That could take a long time, so you want to make sure you have bandwidth prepared. But if you're using tool sets like cloud migration tool sets, you have a little more flexibility. You can start the replication weeks ahead of time, let it catch up, and then fail over at a certain time. So depending on your approach, bandwidth and time frame become a consideration. And then for very large data sets, GCP does offer appliances that you can use that will be shipped out. You copy your data to it and then ship it back to GCP, and they will upload it into their platform. That is generally for much larger data sets or data sets where you can't use SAP or cloud migration tool sets, and you have to use SAP migration techniques. Okay, so now I want to give you an overview of the recent migration project that Managecore performed and the timeline and some key takeaways of the project. So the project client was FFF Enterprises, and that project was basically to migrate their environment from an existing provider into the Google Cloud Platform. Now, the reasoning behind it was basically they were having challenges with uptime and redundancy and making sure that they were available, their systems were highly available, and recent outages had caused business impact. In addition to that, they were looking for a platform that they could innovate on, and the provider they were at did not offer additional technologies like GCP has to innovate and increase the amount of adoption and digital transformation that FFF would have liked. So Managecore came in and we designed the architecture, converted what they had from their current provider to a GCP platform, and came up with a plan for migration. We followed our process, and made sure that we did the planning of it, determined what are the gotchas and what needed to be configured and unique to their platform, ran a test migration, and once we were satisfied with that, started in waves. They did have multiple SAP products, so we would do waves of devs and then queues and then productions. A tool was used for this to do the migration. It was a migration tool, and basically we did a sync of the environment, made sure that as we went through the environment, we would prep enough time based on bandwidth, and we would generally start the syncing of the waves of dev, queue, and prod about 2 weeks ahead of time, and we just let it sync and continually replicate. And when the time came, what we did was we failed over in waves, and each environment was reduced in the amount of time it took to fail over. We started with the true environment of dev that took about 8 hours to fully fail over, but by the time production came about and it was go time, we started on a Saturday morning and finished by Saturday at noon, and had the environment migrated over and up and running in GCP very, very seamlessly. It was really a non-eventful issue. Everything was migrated and working very well by the time we got to production, and all the nuances were noted and added to our project plan. Even though that they did not end up upgrading or anything of that nature as part of this migration, they did happen to see performance increases just based on GCP hardware of up to 7 times more, depending on the reports they were running, all things being equal. So they did see performance increases. They overcame the amount of outages that were occurring, because GCP is inherently a highly redundant architecture, and it really set FFF up for their digital transformation journey. So they've gone and are now, focusing on being able to expand their digital footprint within GCP and using their GCP tool sets to bring, digital transformation to their clients. So it really was a win-win and set FFF up for a platform that could take them into the future. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I will pass the controls on to Kristen here, and she can get started on Q&A. And again, as Kristen mentioned, if there's any questions, feel free to add them into the webinar. And if we run out of time, I will gladly answer them, and we will send them off to you in a separate email.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. That was a really great webinar. So as attendees are getting their questions together, I just wanted to go over our cloud simulator offer that we wanted to give to everyone that is attending today's webinar. So the cloud simulator assessment is powered by Google's Cloud Physics. With this cloud simulator offer, you get all your answers to your questions before making any commitments to deploying or migrating your SAP system to the cloud, such as a comparison side-by-side of a cost analysis and compatibility of the GCP versus running on-prem, if that's what you're doing today. The cloud simulator, again, will be really, really beneficial as you're looking to move to the cloud. It right-sizes your environment, and it really helps answer all those questions before making the commitment to migrate. So as I mentioned, we will be offering this to today's attendees. I'll send a link at the end of this webinar, as well as there's a link on our homepage of our website, managecore.com, where you can register for the cloud simulator. So Nick, did any questions come through yet as you're going through them?
I have not seen any.
All right, I think I have a few that came in while you were talking, so maybe we can go over a few of those as people are taking in some questions. So in a typical lift and shift migration of SAP to GCP, what is my expected downtime?
So your downtime will vary. It's a good question. It depends on your platform. So as you know, GCP and SAP only support certain platforms. So if you're on an unsupported platform, you generally have to do SAP migrations like DMO and SUM and SWPM. And those generally take a little longer, so your downtime could be longer. You have to export your file, transport it to GCP over the internet, and then upload it. So you could be out for a weekend. But as mentioned here, if you're on a supported platform within GCP, you have the ability to use tools, and your downtime could be a couple hours. So it really varies, but yeah, it could be a couple hours even. So
Awesome.
it could be a much shorter downtime than what you'd expect.
Sure, great. So another question that came in is, what other factors should we be considering when completing a HANA migration and looking to go to the cloud?
Sure. So the one thing I really stress when migrating your environment, especially an existing environment, if you're going to migrate an environment into GCP, you really have to, it all starts with where it sits, where it resides today. So really you want to make sure that you have as much buy-in from wherever you're migrating it from to make this project a success. So that if you're migrating it from another private cloud or hardware you do not own or do not have access to, it can get a little trickier. Sometimes you're not allowed to install cloud migration tool sets, so it limits you on the migration. Sometimes you can install it, but with limitations. So I would say the main factor you should really consider when migrating is where these environments are coming from, and just make sure you're aware of it and planning accordingly. And then secondly, as it relates to the bandwidth, as I mentioned, everything in the public cloud is connected over some sort of internet connection. Making sure that you understand and can provision bandwidth as required is going to be key as well.
Great. So the other question here that came in is, how can Managecore help with a managed service solution to optimize my SAP systems once I'm running in the GCP cloud?
Sure, that's a good question. So everyone, has probably had experience tuning SAP to run on specific hardware or a specific platform, and GCP is its own unique platform. And I think Managecore is well suited, being a GCP partner and being familiar and have certified not only SAP consultants but GCP architects and consultants. We have that ability to bridge that gap, and it's not everyone can tune and support environments in every platform. So just be cognizant of that as you're looking around and considering a migration into GCP, that you will likely, it'd be in your best interest to find vendors that have that skill set to be able to bridge the gap between SAP and the GCP cloud and running SAP in GCP.
Sure. Great. Nick, did you get any other questions? I think that's all I had on my side.
That are all the questions I saw.
Great. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Nick, for your time and everyone's time on the phone today, or on the webinar today. We really appreciate it. It was a really great webinar packed with a lot of great information. I did want to remind everyone that we do have another GCP webinar coming up on September 12th. It's regarding 5 ways to accelerate your HANA, S4 HANA, or BW for HANA migration to the Google Cloud Platform. And as always, you can go to our website, managecore.com, for more information about SAP services and our cloud solution offerings. And here is Nick's information. Should anyone have any questions or additional solution needs after the call, we can definitely get you connected with Nick. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.